Okay, so we've talked about creating your own method and the parameters, or I should say the proper sequence of what needs to go into um, the actual method label at the top there. Now, if we want to pass arguments to a method, here's how we do it. So here I have a class called passArg on page 284, and there I have my static void main, and I basically created an integer x and setting it to 10, and I'm basically printing in the console. I am passing the values to display. So I basically have display value 5, display value x times 4, display value integer parse 700. So as you can see, we are basically calling all the same method, and we're passing an argument. Now if we go down and look at how that is passed and received, we can see that it's public and it's static. That means it doesn't need to be instantiated. That's usually how we have to call a method within the same class. Void, we're not returning anything, and then I have display value. It's the name of the method, and inside of the parentheses now I have an argument. That means I'm expecting to receive something. Now I have to declare what type of data type it's going to receive. So in this case I'm expecting an integer, and the variable name is going to be called num. Okay, so up here I'm passing 5, I'm passing x, which is a integer variable. Hit pause. I actually hit pause for a sec. So let me back up a little bit. So up here I'm basically passing a 5. I am passing an x, which is an integer 10, x times 4, and then I'm taking a string 700 and parsing it into an integer and passing that as well. I should see this statement right here displayed 1, 2, 3, 4 different times. So if I run this, we can see that I'm passing the values to display value. The value is 5. There's a 5. X, because that's x is a 10. X times 4 is 40. And then the 700 is converted into the string 700 is converted into an integer, and then displayed that, and then I'm saying back at the main. Okay. So let's kind of talk about this for a second. And as you can see, when I pass in x and I then pass it over here, it's receiving it, it's utilizing it, and then basically I'm coming back. Now the thing that we want to believe is I'm passing x and it's receiving x. Really, that's not what's going on. What we truly have is something called pass. Let me get the right term. It's passing by value. Here's what that means. If I were to take x right here, and let's say, let's say num. If I were to take num right here and add 10 to it, and then display it. So for example, let me say this. I'm going to say num equals num plus 10. Okay. So the first time in, the x is 10. I'm going to add 10 to it, and then basically it should display 20. The next time in, since I added 10 to it, is this x right here now 20, and I want to multiply that times 4? Well, let's see. So if I save it, it's 15, 20, 50, and then 10. I should have expected that to have been the num, well, let me explain what's going on. When I pass this parameter over here, I'm taking exact duplicate. I'm creating a duplicate variable, and I'm giving them that variable. My x still has just 10. Does that make sense? So I'm passing the value over there. I'm not passing the actual variable itself. So when this display value receives num, it can modify all at once. When we get back to the calling method, x never changed. Okay, because I made an exact duplicate of x, I passed it to that other method, they received it as integer num, they call it num as the variable name, and it's an exact duplicate of what the other method has. So the x in the other method has still got 10 in it. I can modify my num all I want. When we get back to that calling method, x still has 10. Okay, so it's called pass by value, and that is basically on page 288. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to basically open up pass by value, and here I have an integer number equals 99, and I'm going to go ahead and say the number is, and then I say change me number. So here I basically say I change my value equals 0, and then I go ahead and print it, and when I come back I would expect the number to basically be changed, but it's not. So if I run this, again it says number is 99, and that's exactly what it appears, 99. I'm changing the value, it's now 0, and when I come back it says number is still 99 because I passed the value. I passed an exact duplicate over to that method. It can change that all at once. My original. So now here's where it gets kind of confusing. I could actually call this number. And I'm going to change this to number as well. So here's what I want you to think of. Even though this has a name number, this variable has a name number. I want you to think of it as having a name tag on a variable, and it's two different variables. They're sitting here. They both have the same name tag, number in the main method and number in the change me method. They look the same. They act the same. In the beginning, they're identical. If this has got 99 in it, this one now has 99 because that's what I passed. I modify this one and change me, but this one still stays the same. So when I get done, and basically that method's over, this one still has 99. So just think of it that way. Think of it as when I pass by value, I'm passing an exact duplicate of that guy. It can have any name tag at once. That's why we like to give it different name tags, call it different names, because it really is truly different. Okay, now if we pass something by reference, so I'm going to pass a string. So in this case, we're passing by reference. What that means is I'm actually passing the address in memory. I'm passing that over to the called method, and when it modifies it, it's actually modifying that address in memory. So when we get back to the calling method, when it basically references that variable, the data has actually changed because we passed that address to the called method, when it modifies that particular area in memory, and we come back, it's changed. So here we have a string name called Shakespeare. I say sysprintout in main, the name is, should say Shakespeare. Then I say change name and I pass name. So down here I'm receiving a string called str, and I change it to Dickens, and then I say the name changed is now, and it's going to say Dickens. We hit the end of that method and we return, and now when I say back at main, the name is, is it going to be Shakespeare or is it going to be Dickens? Let's check it out. So it's running, and it says in the main the name is Shakespeare. In change name the name is now Dickens. Back in main the name is now Shakespeare. Well, in this case, since we passed by value, that's all it did. We basically passed by value. So when we came back, it's still the original name, which is Shakespeare. So passing by reference, kind of hard to do in Java. If you are a coder in, let's say, VB, some of the other languages, passing by reference or passing by value, very easy. In Java, the default is pass by value, and that's pretty much the way it works. And it's really kind of tough to pass by reference. So again, when we pass something to another method, when we get that back, we need to either update it manually right then and there, or we basically accept what we have. So so pass by reference, pass by value. Now on page 292 talks about the at parm tag, and it says when we utilize that parm tag, so when Java sees an at parm tag, that basically is saying, hey, I see you have some documentation for this particular method. So when we look up that particular method within the documentation of our program, whatever's in that parm tag is going to show up as documentation for that particular item. So very helpful to write a parm tag. So let me kind of show you what I mean by that. If we look in the at parm num1 the first number, or at parm the second number, it says so if we were to look at it in the documentation, we would see this particular description of what each one of those variables represents. So again, you probably want to be a little more detailed than just saying the first number and the second number, but basically that's what's going to basically appear. All parm tags in the methods documentation comment must appear after the general description of the method. The description can span several lines. It ends at the end of the documentation comment. So basically, we start with a comment beginning and an ending comment, and then the actual documenter will look for those at parm tags. So and so if we look at the documentation, in this case, you look here at figure 5-13, here we have show sum, which is the name of the method, and it basically shows how it's basically called and how it's basically described. It says the show sum method displays the sum of two numbers. Where did that come from? It came from right here. There's that comment. The show sum method displays the sum of two numbers. That's parameters. You notice we don't have the word parameters, but since we have parm, it knows to write the word parameters, and then it basically just puts the actual variable name and then the descriptor. So that's as far as we're going to go. So we're basically done with this particular week. Next week we'll finish up chapter 5. So we'll see you down the road.